Assalamu alaikum to some of you and peace to the rest of you. I'm going to briefly address double standards. And some of these double standards exist in many communities, but I'm going to talk about how black folk need to deal with some of these double standards. And to a certain extent, how Muslims need to deal with double standards. And I'm going to tie them together at the end anyway. But I'm going to start with this. There are double standards between the genders. One such double standard is the most famous one, and that is that when men sleep around, so what? He's a man, he's more of a man. When women sleep around, they're loose and they're sluts and there's nothing to respect about them. It is a double standard. I would say that. Yet it's very true. And there's a reason that there is such a double standard. It's still a double standard, it's wrong, but there is a double standard. And not only is there one, but people can back up why they have these double standards with reasons, legitimate reasons, actually. You see, when somebody once said that when a lock can't be opened, then it's a master lock. But if a key can open any lock, then it's a master key. And if a key cannot open any lock, it's a crap key. And if a lock can be opened by any key, then it is a crap lock. And of course, men have to be the key and the women have to be the locks. So this told me something right there. I realized then that this is the expectation across the human species, that women are going to act like the locks. They're just going to close up, and men have to figure out ways to unlock them. Now, there's a flaw in that reasoning. The reasoning does exist to a certain extent, but there's still a flaw in the reasoning, and the reasoning is that the women don't have the same interest that men have. The reasoning behind it is that women don't have a libido, so they don't actually want a ding-a-ling anyway. And in reality, both men and women are responsible for that misconception. Men are responsible for the misconception that men have no standards when it comes to sex and are just always ready and willing to screw anybody that says, hey, let's go back in these bushes over here. Let's go in the barn or somewhere nobody else is, and I'll bend over. And the expectation across the board for a lot of people is that the men are okay with this. Although subconsciously we realize that that's not true. And the expectation is that women are never okay with something like that, unless and until some extraordinary circumstances develop around a particular man, like extreme wealth and royalty or extreme height or muscles. Then that guy's going to be one of the few that goes around and unlocks a bunch of women, if you will. When in reality, men are not as loose as we are stereotyped to be pretty much across cultures. Yes, many cultures have the same misconception, assuming men to be looser than they really are, and assuming that women have less needs than what they really do. And this is why it is that in the Quran, the penalty for fornication for men and women is the same penalty. And this is why it is that the fornication, the penalty for adultery when you are married, is the same penalty for men and women. Whoever's married gets caught sleeping with somebody else outside the marriage is the one that's going to get executed. Whoever's not married and gets caught sleeping with somebody is going to get caned on the back. And this is also why fornication and adultery are not considered the exact same thing anyway. In Arabic, the word is the same, but you have to specify outside of his marriage or outside of her marriage. You got to specify that to differentiate between run-of-the-mill fornication and outright adultery. In English, we have a specific word, adultery. And that's when someone's married and does someone else. Now, this double standard here, this is the kick about it. Why would God, knowing how people are, have a standard that's not a double standard, even though we could come up with a reasonable expectation for it? It's simple. Allah knows that women actually have libidos. He created it in them. Women have them like their husbands do. This is why it is that in Islamic law, a man refusing to pull his pants down for his wife is a valid reason for her to take him to court and divorce him. And if a woman brings that claim to a judge in an Islamic court and the divorce is not granted off the bat, the only reason is because the husband is arguing the point or or able to show some evidence that they have in fact been pulling the pants down when she tells him to. This means that under Islamic law, the man's genitals belong to the wife as much as hers belong to him, with one difference, and that is that he's allowed to marry up to 4. She can marry only 1 at a time. That's it. Men and women are different, but they're not different species. So the reason for this is because if you ask a Muslim, we're going to tell you that it's because God knows things about people they don't know about themselves. So even though there's a perception all around the world, it has a hell of a lot more to do with anatomy than it has to do with reality. It has a hell of a lot more to do with what you can see. Men's genitals hang out. You can see them, so you assume that they're always ready to go. Women's genitals don't. They hang in, if you will, or fold in. So you don't necessarily know how they're feeling. And they're very good at hiding how they feel, especially when they should not. And then they flip it on men. Well, you men don't talk enough. Y'all don't express yourselves enough. Well, you know, as men, that's not actually what's sought after anyway. Men aren't sought after when they explain their emotions. So, in a nutshell, these double standards are actually the fault of human beings and not the fault of God or something natural that's okay. Now, those double standards are an honest mistake that people have made, but they're a mistake based on things that people just simply didn't know till God told us. Now, how do we deal with it? I said I was going to talk about how we should deal with double standards in general. We got the gender double standards that I just now mentioned. The other one is that women can hit men, but men can't hit women. That's a double standard. How do we deal with that? Well, let's be honest. If you take any human being, especially when you don't teach them to be adults, and in the West, women aren't even socialized that they have to grow the hell up to get a ding-a-ling, to get a man. Women aren't socialized to understand that they need to be grown before they even can have sex. So sex is too easy for them. And men are socialized to understand that they got to be men and then supermen to not be forced into celibacy and become incels. That's really the truth of the matter as far as how we're socialized. So you take, if you take a block of people that are not culturally socialized to have to be adults, and you tell them they can hit someone with impunity, they're going to hit them. Most children are like that. The reason that you got a problem with bullying is because you got a bunch of children who have been told they can hit whoever they want with impunity and nothing can be done about it. Do we not? Well, it's the same thing going on. Why do you see a hell of a lot more injuries on men nowadays than on women when there's a domestic dispute and the domestic dispute gets a police phone call? Because the women understand they can hit a man, call the police, say that he hit her, and then either they both go to jail or he goes to jail. Now, if there's evidence that a man hit a woman and no evidence the woman hit the man, and he says, she hit me first, he goes to jail and she doesn't. That's what happened in the case with Bow Wow and his ex just now. If you flip the script and she had one mark on her, she would not have gone to jail, and he still would have. There's no situation in which there's a domestic dispute phone call to the police and the man does not go to jail and the woman does, unless maybe there's several eyewitnesses or a video. Even then, by the time the witness statements and the video come out, the man has already spent some time in a holding cell. That's what it boils down to. There's a double standard. Now, how do we deal with this? The way that the black manosphere is dealing with that last double standard I mentioned is the way we deal with it. Racial double standards. I'm going to take immigration as an example. Black folks support illegal immigration sometimes, or just immigration in general, if it's black folks that get to come in. I'm fine with that, so long as it is black folks that don't have what I call the Nigerian attitude. It's not because I hate Nigerians, I don't. I should specify it and say the Lagos attitude, because Nigerians have a bad reputation, even in Africa they have it. And it's unfortunate because it's really these MFs from Lagos that have this attitude. They're street smart, they're the baddest criminals, you need to be scared of them, and if you ain't from their tribe and their same background, they're gonna talk bad about you and all this other stuff. That's not even northern Nigeria. That's Lagos and surrounding areas. It's southern Nigeria, giving the rest of Nigeria a bad name. And I don't blame other people when they have problems with Nigerians, to be honest with you, because that's all they know. And guess which Nigerians migrate out of the country the most often and represent Nigeria? Southerners from the Lagos and surrounding areas. That's who. So they get to talking, saying all kind of foul stuff about everybody else. But outside of that, we're dealing with black immigration. Black people need to support immigration, legal or illegal, when it is black people that are immigrating to the U.S. We need to be against immigration, legal or illegal, when it is white folks. Specifically Western European white folks, because Eastern Europeans don't come here in large numbers. That's what we need. And really, I'd say make the Russians an exception. What is the attitude towards black folks? Oh, they got problems with us. They don't see us as equals. Boot their behinds too, even if they came in legally. This needs to be our position. We need to have no conscience about supporting racial double standards, because they were always there in the first place. They were just against us. So now we support them to our favor and the detriment of white supremacy. No apologies for it. This is what we need to do, and we need to all get on code about this. Oh, it's a Haitian immigrating to the U.S.? Well, if he ain't got a problem with other black people, then we support him immigrating to the States, legally or not. F your paperwork. You don't belong here anyway. That's what we need to be saying to these folks. The only illegal immigration we need to really be worried about is pro-white or anti-black. That's it. And really, it's the same thing. Now, the Muslim stance on these things is the oppressor is always wrong and the victim is always superior to the oppressor. That's the Islamic stance on it. The oppressor, see, people like to talk about the message of equality in Islam. No. Actually, it's not about equality. It is about tribal equality, racial equality, even gender equality. Not identicality, but equality. But the oppressor is still always inferior to the victim. You do not treat them like they're the same when you can establish clearly who is which one. And that's why it is I'm sitting up here recording this anyway. You see, the true understanding of justice in Islam, which is fair but it is also strict, is exactly what black folks need to understand. We do not owe white folks a goddamn effing thing except a revolution. And we're not prepared to give them that. But in the meantime, we can take certain stances like, you know what, we're not going to tolerate this women hitting men, men don't hit women. Because what's going to happen in our communities? To hell with your community, it's your problem. But in our communities, we're not going to have the genders bashing each other like this. Either one of them bashing the other. And you know what? To hell with your sense of racial equality. You're the ones that need to get the hell up out of the Americas and every other wealthy nation. You need to get up out of them. Go back to Europe and see how wealthy Europe remains when they can't take anything from the rest of the darker world. That's what we need to do. We don't need to be trying to play fair with white folks, so to speak. We do need to be fair for ourselves and for God, but we don't need to be fair by their definition of fairness and justice. Because their definition of fairness and justice always allows them to get ahead without paying for it. I'll leave it at that. I hope that this message has been of benefit. Assalamu alaikum.